to another episode of Tech Interviews. So one of the joys of doing the video version of this show is it means I come up with interesting and new technical challenges pretty much every week while we're finding the right recording platform and the right way of recording the video shows. And so what that does mean is sometimes we have odd technical challenges that we've not been able to do anything about, and that includes this week. So on this week's show, it's the first time that we've got two guests as we take a look back at MS Ignite. So that's 3 video streams. However, when we've looked back at the recording, one of those video streams is missing. Now, fortunately, it's my face that's missing, so you'll still be able to see the faces of my guests. But what we do to cover that is that this guy, my little avatar, he'll be joining the show this week and replacing the piece where my face should be. So hopefully you'll enjoy the avatar. Hopefully you'll still enjoy the show. There's loads of great thoughts and feedback on MS Ignite, so I'm sure you will. So settle back and enjoy the show, and hopefully next week my guest and my face will all be back where they should be. Thanks for watching. Hi and welcome to another episode of Tech Interviews. On this week's show, we seem like we're heading off into virtual conference season. I didn't even know that was a thing until the last week. So we've got VMworld coming up this week while we're recording. We've got NetApp Insight coming up later in October. We've got Veeam Live coming up later in October. And last week, at the point we're recording this at least, last week we had Microsoft Ignite. So I wanted just to grab a couple of people, in the most polite way of course, get hold of a couple of people just to kind of get their views of what we heard from Microsoft over the couple of days. For me, I thought it was a really interesting conference and a real interesting shift in a way that Microsoft are looking at the world. But hey, who wants to know what I thought when we can have a couple of people who spend a lot of time working in the Microsoft ecosystem to join me and share what they thought and what they took away from the event. So well, both guests are returning guests to the show, one being on much more recently than the other. So why don't I introduce my guests? I'm joined today by Sarah Lean and Kirk Ryan. Hi guys, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well. Yeah, Kirk, how are you doing?
Great, thanks, Paul.
Okay, I just thought I'd check, being as you didn't say anything when I asked first time. I just wanted to make sure you were still alive. Well, look, before we jump into MS Ignite, I know people have certainly seen Sarah on the show recently, but for those who haven't before, maybe I'll start with you, Kirk. Why don't you tell people who you are and what it is you do?
Sure, no worries. So hi everyone, my name's Kirk Ryan. If you ever contact me, you'll get it the wrong way and call me Ryan. So if you ever meet someone called Ryan Kirk, I'm the same person. I work in the Azure team at NetApp, so primarily covering Azure NetApp files. I'm the principal technologist for that. And that means I work very closely with my colleagues over at Microsoft, helping design data solutions. So everything that you could do on-premise, but in Azure, in the most cost-effective, optimal manner possible.
Okay, sounds good. I like that. Cost-effective and optimal, and indeed the amount of times you get called Ryan is hilarious for the rest of us. Probably really annoying for you. And Sarah. So for people who don't know who you are, Sarah, why don't you tell us who you are, what you do?
So I'm a senior cloud advocate at Microsoft, which means I get to do some fun stuff for my job. So I write blogs, I do videos, I get to play with technology, I get to interact with the community, and I get paid to even do stuff like this with you guys. So yeah, I have a pretty cool job.
And I'd just like to point out for anybody who's planning on being a Tech Interviews guest, when Sarah says she's getting paid to do things like this, she doesn't mean by me. So you know, let's just set the expectations. And if Kirk's now writing me an email asking where does he send the invoice, he's going to be really disappointed. So both are doing this perfectly for free, just to share their thoughts. So we were talking a little bit before about this kind of running into what seems to be a season for virtual conferences. Obviously 2020 has meant pretty much virtual conferences all the way. But for people who've not familiar with Microsoft Ignite and what MS Ignite covers, Sarah, maybe as a Microsoft person in the room, do you want to kind of give us a little bit of context around what MS Ignite covers, what it's there for?
Yeah, sure. Microsoft Ignite is usually our biggest in-person, largest conference that we hold every year, and it's focused on the technical sessions. So we often do big product announcements at these kind of events, and then cover off lots of technical sessions about how you can solve problems with Microsoft technology. And it's focused around not only the technology, but the community as well. So it's great to be able to bump into friends and colleagues from across the world at these events, share some stickers, share a good drink and stuff like that, and just have some fun. And it's really, yeah, I think that's really just Ignite technology and community.
technology community and drinking. It sounds like so. There's a tech conference in a nutshell. I would think. And actually, Sarah, just I don't know how much actually you was involved in MS Ignite. I know you did. There's kind of a couple of sessions, and I saw a couple of kind of live things that you did as well. But from a Microsoft point of view, what was there? Were they apprehensive doing this as an online event? What was kind of the Microsoft view? Did they look to try and deliver a kind of different type of conference this year?
A little bit of all of that, Paul, to be honest, because our first virtual conference was actually billed earlier this year. I think that was back in like April or something. So I think the team had like 6 weeks to scramble together from turning that into an in-person event to a virtual one. So we took lots of learnings from that. And then we had several of our internal and partner conferences as well in the summer, virtual, instead of going to Las Vegas and being there. So we definitely took all the learnings from Microsoft Ignite and try to push it back, from those other events and push it back into Ignite. I don't know whether we did it right or not. I'd love to hear from the audience and maybe even yourselves if we did manage to get it right in the blend of technology and community. We did focus a lot on trying to get that human element together and make sure that there was lots of interactions and it wasn't just Microsoft people talking to you and delivering a session and then disappearing. But like I said, I'd love to hear feedback on whether we did it right or wrong and how we can improve, because it looks like we're doing another Ignite in March 2021. So we definitely want to take the feedback from this one and push it into the March one as well.
So I'll let Kirk do the offensive stuff then, if you want to know how it went. So obviously, so Kirk, for you, you work for a vendor in NetApp, a data storage, data management company. But you, like you said, you spend a lot of time working in the Microsoft ecosystem because of the role you play at NetApp. But so from and obviously NetApp have their own conferences as well, and we'll do a couple of podcasts and shows about that in the upcoming weeks. But for a vendor like NetApp, how do you see Microsoft Ignite? Why are NetApp keen to be involved in that? And what did NetApp bring to MS Ignite this year? What was your aims?
I think it's a really important event for us because it showcases that transition from us moving away from being a traditional storage vendor. I think we've managed to finally shake that sort of perception of we're just on-premise tin. That's something that's taken a while to sort of move on from that to being on stage, being announced in the keynotes at Ignite around being one of the strategic technology vendors that help Microsoft build their solutions. So that's really changed things. And I've been in this team now for 2 years where we've had the dedicated Azure team. We've always had a Microsoft Alliance team. I've been in that one for 7 years. But the level of what we're doing now is totally unique because it's not NetApp selling something as NetApp. It's NetApp helping Microsoft build something that really goes out there, helps their customers migrate easily into the cloud. And we're on that journey with Microsoft, building it, bringing those customers and to their mission statement, empowering those customers to go and achieve those goals in the cloud. So it's been absolutely, like being on a rocket ship, and only more so obviously since everything kicking off in the current world scenario. I'd say one phrase stuck out with me, and I'm not sure if I heard who said it. I think it might have been in Mark's session where he went through and he said, we have to think of, really thank a lot of people on the ground here because basically we're doing 1 year of digital transformation in typically just 1 month. And that's hard to keep up with. So when we go through the announcements, there's just so much there. This could easily be a 30-minute discussion or a 3-day discussion if we wanted to go through everything there. But yeah, it's been fantastic to be on that bleeding edge in the new world of 100% cloud and helping customers to build out and really sort of achieve their cloud mandates.
So you say 3-day discussion jokingly, but as you two know, so this is the first of the kind of tech interviews where we're doing video, where we've done that with more than one guest. We did all feel we might be here 3 days just getting the recording to work properly. So anyway, we're here. It hasn't taken 3 days so far, just the 2.5. So actually, Kate, I mean, just for and we're going to probably look to do a show over the forthcoming weeks where we talk a little bit more about kind of that NetApp Microsoft integration piece. But for people who are not familiar with what Microsoft are doing inside of the Azure cloud, do you want to give us kind of a minute or so on kind of what NetApp are doing there, and and some of those solutions NetApp are building alongside Microsoft?
Yeah, sure. So we're helping Microsoft build a very resilient, reliable, scalable, and performant shared files platform, which is confusingly called Azure NetApp Files. So having the word NetApp in there gives a lot of people the impression that it's from NetApp, but it's not. It's actually a first-party Microsoft service, just like Azure Files, just like a managed disk or a virtual machine or even a VNet from that perspective. So it's entirely first-party, supported by Microsoft and sold by Microsoft. But what that means is that traditionally very hard, difficult to migrate, complex to migrate systems, whether it be your mission critical Oracle database through to some of the larger things like SAP HANA are probably the biggest projects I tend to work on repeatedly. Some multiple petabyte scale sort of customers there to give you some sort of idea of what we're dealing with. That allows those customers to be able to build those appropriate landing zones in Azure, to have it fully vendor supported as well, which is obviously very important for your mission critical things, and basically be able to do what they said was impossible. Pick up this data, run it much the same within the performance envelope of what you may have on-prem, and be billed by the hour for it. So that's brilliant. Being able to bring that in and not say, yes, here's a NetApp piece of tin and you have to buy it for 3 years and it's just connected to Azure, for example. That's not the case. This is an entirely native service. Let's go plug it into AKS, or let's go and put it to your SAP HANA VM. So it's really sort of great. I'd certainly suggest there's a lot of content out there. Most notably docs.microsoft.com. Just pop onto docs.microsoft.com, look up storage, look at Azure NetApp Files. It's there, and Microsoft has got all the documentation content and videos on there.
So you've beat Sarah to talking about docs.microsoft.com. So we'll have to think of something else to mention. But okay, yeah. So yeah, and I do encourage people to go and have a look at some of the stuff that NetApp are doing in the Azure space, because I think it's interesting. And I suppose we kind of move on to Microsoft Ignite. I mean, my kind of key thing that really struck me, and you've seen this over probably the last 3 years, maybe with any kind of Microsoft conference, is if you've never come across Microsoft, the idea that Microsoft have been a traditional enterprise company who have built software that sits on-prem would seem very foreign to you. I know there's a couple of and actually one of my favorite sessions talked about the future of Windows, and I thought that was Brad Anderson, one of Brad Anderson's sessions that I thought was really interesting. But there's no doubt that the focus of where Microsoft take these events now is very much around this idea of an interest, Kirk, kind of the way you're describing NetApp's relationship, is this idea of enterprise cloud. This is not really developer cloud, although I thought there's quite a lot of really interesting stuff around developers in there. This is not really consumer cloud. This is very much built for the enterprise, to allow enterprises to kind of tactically introduce cloud into maybe more traditional on-prem businesses. So that was something that really struck me and continues to strike me at these events. But so maybe, Sarah, from a Microsoft point of view, what were some of the kind of the key things that jumped out at you from Ignite this time round, whether that was kind of announcements or maybe even general shifts in thinking that maybe were either something you did or didn't expect, perhaps?
I think there was tons of announcements that we could talk about. I think I focused on the IT Pro ones because that's my background in the audience that I talked to. And I think one of the big ones that I was quite excited about and I hadn't heard about even in the background was Azure Auto Manage, which is this, I want to say cool, that makes me sound a little bit sad, but it's a great way of managing your virtual machines. I actually was playing with it today because it's in public preview, so you can go in the Azure portal and have a look at it. But what it allows you to do is onboard your Azure virtual machines onto a bunch of Azure services. So update management, change tracking, log analytics, backup, all at the click of a button, right? You can set it up and it does it all. And you have like these two profiles that we've set up just right now. So you can set it up as a production virtual machine. So, it'll have that full kind of production suite, or you can set it up as a dev test one, and we'll only get some of the features because we probably won't want to back up our development environment, so it won't turn on backup. But it's a couple of clicks, and if you've ever configured this in the portal for an Azure virtual machine, you'll know you're like 3 or 4 blades for each thing, half a dozen clicks, half a dozen things you have to set up. But this Azure Auto Manage does it all ultimately in about 4 or 5 clicks. And I'm like, well, that's going to be awesome for trying to manage or auto manage some of your virtual machines and save you time from doing the time consuming stuff, so you can actually go and play with some of the more fun technology that's around. So yeah, I'm excited to dive into that and see where we actually take that. And hopefully it won't be too long in preview and we can get it in GA. But yeah, that's exciting for me.
Yeah, and I think, it's interesting. It's one of those things that you kind of wasn't necessarily aware of, because you spend a lot of your time, or if not all of your time, kind of architecting solutions inside of Azure. But I think it's an example of the way that public cloud is moving. It's that rapid speed of innovation. And actually that idea, again, one of the things that really stood out for me was there's a lot of, I thought a lot of consideration about how you build in manageability, automation, control, and actually simplify quite a lot of this stuff. And I'll come back to something that kind of, I'd be interested in the thoughts that both of you maybe have on this. I'll come back to something a little bit later. But so Kirk, for you, was there something that really stood out for you? Maybe again something perhaps you wasn't expected, whether it's a NetApp or a Microsoft announcement.
Well, yeah, there were 2 massive announcements that I weren't expecting, but just on Sarah's point there, I think the thing around the auto managed piece, as exciting as that is just, it allows you to just focus on bringing value into the business as opposed to keeping the lights on. So that we saw that as a big win for ourselves as well, because nobody likes patching at the end of the day. So, but the 2 big ones, go on. Obviously, going to be Orbital. Orbital was a massive one that we saw, and we're just like, wow, 1 minute we're in space, and then by the opposite part of it, we were looking at Project Natick. And we're under the sea. So we've gone from space to under the sea very quickly. And I thought those were really interesting things to see. Like
from space to under the sea really quickly is not always a good thing. Just to point out. So actually, Kirk, just for people who maybe not familiar with those 2 projects, do you want to give a little bit of, as much detail as you can? I know there wasn't loads of detail in the event, but maybe for people who aren't familiar with those 2 projects.
Yeah, I'll try my best. So for Orbital, what I took away was it's basically a pay by the hour, so pay as you go ground station services, which would be great for anyone in broadcast, multimedia, or if you do happen to have any satellites hanging around, then you can point them directly into Azure and get secure connection and pay by the hour for it, rather than standing up all this infrastructure and basically turning that CapEx to a nice OpEx instead. So that can make you very agile. And of course, the beauty of that is it's all under the security umbrella of Microsoft, who spend billions of dollars on security. So when you connect into satellites, you want to make sure it's secure. So that's absolutely fantastic. And I'm still thinking of what use case I can get to try and put it in my lab. But I'm sure I'll think of something. And that was really interesting. So I think the ones for me were sort of broadcast, multimedia, that those sort of organizations. And then really sort of going into Natick. Natick was this really cool experiment now around syncing data centers basically under the sea and seeing, are these viable? Are they friendly to the animals and everything under the sea, all that sort of thing? So are they eco-friendly? And what was amazing was seeing basically, I think, a whole new series of how we build data centers has just kind of arrived, because some of the learnings from that, like removing all the oxygen, seem to have a bigger impact on taking the failure rate down on those components. And I think Mark was saying, we can't send scuba divers down there to go and replace disks and things like that. So it's built to last, and that seems to be really cool. So I wouldn't be surprised to start seeing some of those learning, like nitrogen-filled DCs or something like that. You never know, right? Because at that sort of scale, remembering it was only sort of, by comparison, a smaller scale POC. So I think it was 2 years, wasn't it, Sarah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was 2 years.
So yeah, it looks fantastic. And one thing we also said is the fact that, you know, if you're in certain areas where the land or the power or whatever is quite difficult to get hold of, you could just sync an entire DC very close proximity. Because if you take, for example, some of the regions in across Africa, it might be very difficult to put them on the land, but if you can put them in the sea, then that's the continent of Africa that's not having to go to typically EU West, for example, and that could have some really good implications for those users over there. So that's an exciting one as well. And you know, I've got a scuba diving qualification, so if they're ever in need, then I'm sure I can help out somehow.
There's Kirk, always touting, which is what I like. I mean, actually, Sarah, because I mean they're both fascinating projects. You know, is there, you know, from a Microsoft point of view, you know, is there other things you can share? You know, maybe particularly from kind of the deep sea data center idea. You know, what kind of things did Microsoft learn that maybe weren't so obvious from Ignite?
I think Kirk touched on the main points, to be honest. I actually had the opportunity during the night to interview Brian Janis, who's in charge of our energy and sustainability for all our Azure data centers. So I managed to get a few questions in around NATIC as well. But we're doing other cool things with some of our other data centers, actually. Like we've got a new region coming up in West US 3, I think we're calling it, and it's in Arizona, where that's going to be entirely powered by solar power, because Arizona is massively sunny, and we're doing some awesome things with the water as well, because it's a desert state obviously, and the water is a bit scarce, so we're doing some cool things about recycling that water as well. So I think we're going to see more projects like that. Certainly when I interviewed Brian, he said that when we think about some of our data centres, we're going to be using the local energy. Obviously, if you came to Scotland and built an Azure data centre, you would not be using solar panels, you would be putting it in the sea, and you would be using like wind power and stuff like that. So I think that's where we're going to, I think that's where we're going to go in terms of the data centres and some of the stuff. Like Kurt said, we will sync data centres off the coast of a country potentially, because it will give us better connectivity to that country and be better for sustainability and energy usage and stuff like that. So I think that direction that we're going in is actually quite exciting, even though it's not the technology side, although it kind of is, because that's what we need to think about as well nowadays.
Yeah, and I think with stuff like that, it's the value of events that are done by companies like Microsoft. You know, so it doesn't really matter what your view of Microsoft technology may or may not be, but what you can't deny is that Microsoft, because of its scale, has huge influence. So it allows Microsoft to do things that lots of organisations can't. So as you were talking about there, with those kinds of what are test and dev, you know, they're development projects, really. You know, they're not necessarily being done because right now there's some kind of commercial opportunity for Microsoft. They're being done because Microsoft are trying things out that maybe one day we'll see in kind of daily technology that we use. You know, like Kate was saying about how we might see data centers architected differently. As you were saying, Sarah, you know, it gives you opportunities to potentially do things that you've never thought of doing before. But it also, and I think one of the things that's fascinating, particularly around public cloud, and it really stood out for me in quite a lot of the things I heard from Microsoft during the couple of days, was the idea that it's really it's making it much easier for people to do really smart innovation. You know, the power of what sits in public cloud, you know, people talking about kind of things like quantum computing, the scale of compute capability. You know, those kind of things that are in there that were allowing. So there's some great examples, some great customer examples, I thought, of how people, particularly over the last 7 months, you know, as part of kind of COVID response, have been able to build brand new solutions to help their community, to help the environment, and they've been able to deliver that in the cloud, and actually been able to deliver that in the cloud with very little knowledge of how to do development. You know, I said earlier on, wasn't particularly necessarily a developer cloud Azure, and that's unfair, because actually one of the things that really stood out for me, and I'd be interested in both of your thoughts on this, was I think how easy, there was lots of focus on how easy or how much effort actually Microsoft have put into putting tools and capabilities that are simple to use in the hands of people who know how to use them. So I think one of the examples, and I forget the school now, she was a school head teacher, and I think she'd kind of developed a learning platform for while during kind of the COVID response. And she did that. She freely admitted she wasn't a developer, she wasn't a programmer, but the tools were given to her, put in her hands, made easy for Microsoft to use, things like Power Automate, and that allowed her to develop solutions really, really quickly because she knew the things that she wanted. Microsoft gave her the capability to do that, and I thought that was really impressive. Actually, somebody who's somebody looking into Microsoft, and somebody I know who has done their own kind of product development outside of actually their day job. How important is that kind of thing from companies like Microsoft to put those kind of capabilities in people's hands?
It's really important on several levels. I mean, just even if you're semi-technical and you just go, well, will this idea even work? You probably understand the logic. You've got a great whiteboard that you can put up and go, I know where my data needs to go. I know the decision trees and everything else. And it's quite natural to think that way as well, to think of, well, here's step 1, 2, 3, 4, and step 7 is the value of what I'm going to bring as a company. And, it's not necessarily brand new announcements. It's not forgetting the things that Microsoft have already done to innovate around this space. So logic apps, for example, durable functions, all of these things that you can, pick up. There's no infrastructure. You don't have to maintain it. You just focus on business logic or business decisions. So everything from, I can think of manual processes when I was a customer, like cab requests, and we've got to do our cab, and something's got to get approved, and you can put all these approval gates, emails, notifications, everything in, just drag and drop, basically. So, yeah, it's been really important, and the fact that you can do it across so many different pieces. So you've got the code and everything else, but you've also got like just normal office decisions around documents, or security decisions, or action groups coming off infrastructure, and it's just. Yeah, it's great to be able to just focus on what do we need to do rather than how do we need to do it all the time, and having to go to the real low levels of just being able to get that value back out of the system. So that's been a game changer.
Yeah, and agreed. And I think from your point of view, Sarah, how are you seeing? Because obviously you're working with customers a lot and how they're moving into the Microsoft cloud. Are you seeing again this kind of innovation around simplifying and putting tools into people's hands who need them? Are you seeing that's helping for enterprises to adopt public cloud more easily?
I think so. I think it's really interesting to see what some of the non-techies in the business, if you want to call that, can do that. But it's also interestingly bringing another challenge for the IT departments, if I'm honest, because it's great that the business users have access to these tools, but then you have to put some kind of governance and control around it so that the old traditional way, if we're talking about it, was maybe macros in Excel, and someone would, and the finance department would make a great macro and it'd be an awesome spreadsheet. That person would leave, it would break, and then all of a sudden the company grinds to a halt, right? We've probably all been there, or the spreadsheet is broken, we've had to recover it from backup, and it's just been horrid. And I think we need to watch, not being skeptical on putting anything down here, but if we're giving the business users tools like Power Automate, we also need to be aware of how to manage these and control them. Not stifle innovation, not saying that at all, but be aware of them and just, have that complete circle of education, so that the IT department's aware of them as well as the business, so that we can all grow together and we don't end up hating each other over macros and stuff like that.
Well, I suppose, like you said, it's you don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past, because that Excel example, I'm sure everybody listening or watching to this has been there, where they've seen businesses that almost run on the Excel spreadsheet that Fred developed 20 years ago, and Fred died 10 years ago. It's that kind of, how does the business continue to run, but nobody dare touch it because nobody's sure how the 94 million cells all tie together. So look, we said at the beginning that and before we started recording, we felt like we might be here for 3 days talking about this, but we did say there was that many announcements that we could talk for 3 days. So to appreciate we're not going to go through many more, but maybe as we kind of wrap up, perhaps from each of you, do you want to kind of give me, if there was something that somebody could go back and see in those Ignite sessions, because a lot of them will still be online, they'll be able to go and catch up with them. Is there something you'd recommend that they went back and had a look at? If there was one thing that somebody was going to spend some time on. I'll start with you, Kirk.
Yeah, so shameless plug, obviously working for NetApp, but there was a great one that, what I liked, Sarah, you mentioned about some feedback. I loved the fact you can fill your backpack up and do the real-time stuff, but then have a break, because it can get a bit overwhelming sometimes. So what I put in my backpack for the breakout was around the new announcement about Azure Spot VMs. So being able to go and get that spare resource at discounted price for your modern web apps. But then what I liked was there was a joint session that we ran on the new announcement. So NetApp bought Spot, who specialize in orchestrating running your app across Spot instances whilst maintaining 4.9's availability, because the risk with a Spot is that it no longer is available and it gets switched off. But you don't want your application to disappear, right? So there was an announcement around Elastigroup, which is the feature for Spot that's now there in Azure. And that's a real big enabler for people that want to do modern web apps using Spot applications and have an availability SLA across the top. So that was a great breakout session. So shameless plug, definitely go check that one out.
Okay, well, make sure that goes in the show notes. And same question to you then, Sarah. So if there's one session, shamelessly feel free to shamelessly plug just as much. But if there's one session, if somebody was going to say, I'm going to take an hour and go and watch something from Ignite, what would it be?
I think we did a session around Windows Server and where the future lies for Windows Server. I think a lot of IT pros think that we've left Windows Server behind, and it's something that's not going to follow them into Azure. I think if you watch that session, you'll see how we're still developing Windows Server. We're still very much at the heart of what we do and where the future is going with some of the Azure Stack HCI operating systems and various different bits and pieces around even just the admin, Windows Admin Center is now available in the Azure portal. We are still very much in love with Windows Server. We're still very much, at heart Windows Server people. We've got new learnings. I'm hopeful that we're going to get some exams back. That's what we're banging the drum about. But yeah, the Windows Server session and where the future is going is probably key for a lot of IT pros who have spent, like me and probably like you too, have spent their career in Windows Server. So definitely check that one out as well.
I did see a Twitter poll that said what was the earliest version of Windows that you'd worked with. I've worked with Windows for so long, the earliest version wasn't on the poll. So that was something. It stopped at Windows 95. I did pre that. But that's a story for another day. And actually, on that note as well, I mean, one thing I would suggest people looked at if they wanted to find out more about kind of Microsoft's commitments and view of Windows going forward was Brad Anderson and Panos Panay did kind of one of the main. It was like a main stage session where they talked about the future Windows. And one of my favourite quotes from Ignite came in there where they talked about it's no longer time to start talking about how things have changed. We've got to accept they have now changed. It's how we deal with that change, And I think there's some really good messages throughout Ignite for that as well. So, you asked Sarah at the beginning, had Microsoft done a good job with it? I mean, personally for me, I thought it was really well delivered. Thought the balance of the sessions was really good. The breakout sessions were light-hearted enough and entertaining enough to kind of keep me sat at my desk watching. So which is always a good sign. So that was right, and actually I think what was really important was the quality of how it was delivered as well. The quality of the video was fantastic. I certainly didn't come across any issues where sessions were jittering and stopping, and we were, I didn't see any of that. I thought that Microsoft, and again, probably as you said, Cyril, from what they've learned from a couple of big conferences already this year, and having Azure at the back end of that, to deliver that kind of scale and deliver it quickly. But it's like, say, drinking your own champagne. If Microsoft can't do that well, what's the hope for the rest of us? So look, guys, as kind of we wrap up here, you've both shamelessly plugged your own content, but here's a chance to do it again. So I'll start with you, Kirk, because I know you've produced some really good video content around the stuff that you do at NetApp, and you're pretty visible out there on the social. So if people want to follow you and hunt you down, and find out more about the day job as well, how do they go about doing that?
There's probably three best places to come and find me. kirkryan.co.uk is where I put my usual ramblings and link to my videos. YouTube, just type Kirk Ryan. I think depending where you are in the world, I'll pop up number 1 or 3. And finally, there's a new community actually. So us ANF folks thought it's time to build a global community around data. So anfcommunity.com, and you can find almost daily articles around data architecture design, and obviously the latest musings around Azure NetApp files there as well.
And it's important not to go searching for Ryan Kirk because he's got a whole bunch of different videos on the internet.
Yeah, we can't mention those. Are we past the watershed yet?
Yeah, it's a family show. Let's not do that. And for Sarah, for anybody who's not seen the marvelous content that you create, how do they go about finding you and seeing some of the stuff that you do?
Yep, so you'll find me on Twitter as TechieLass. I do have my own personal blog, which is techieLass.com, but I more often now blog on our team blog, which is itopstalk.com. And also, please feel free to join me for the Glasgow Azure user group, which is going virtual, and we're having a meetup in end of October and December. So yeah, be happy to see you there.
I will also plug for you for anybody who wants to kind of keep up with announcements around Microsoft Cloud, around Azure particularly. Do check out Sarah's weekly updates. That on a Friday, I think they get pushed out on a Friday. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Friday at 10 a.m. So
check her out. Check her out on the YouTubes for that. So, hey guys, thanks for. I really appreciate you giving up your time and the 25 minutes of technical torture we went through before we started recording. So, hey, thanks for being on, and no doubt have you both back on the show in the not too distant future. Thanks very much.
Awesome. Cheers.
Cheers.
I'm back. So I hope you enjoyed the show. For show notes, of course, pop over to techstringy.com. We'll also find all of our previous Tech Interviews episodes. And if you've got an idea for a show, then why not drop me an email at podcast@techstringy.com. If you want to make sure you catch next week's show, which hopefully includes both the face of me and my guests, then why not subscribe? You can subscribe here on YouTube or, of course, in all good homes of podcasts. So until next week, thanks for watching.